welcome to another wrap-up. Bet you weren't expecting that type of intimacy today. Hello, baby girls. Welcome to a new video. Very excited once again, but we are doing something relatively boring, but not really. Depends what you're into. We're doing just a simple wrap-up, but I haven't done, if you have noticed, if you are a true watcher, you might have noticed that I haven't done a wrap-up since February. Yeah. In March I started studying for my finals. I was like, I'm from here on, I'm not really gonna be reading much until they're done, and I was right. So I'm gonna rapid fire through the books that I read in March and April, and then I'm gonna go more in depth about the books that I read in May, because I'm not gonna lie to you, I tried to film this already and I tried to talk about the books that I read in March and nothing came to mind. Like, genuinely, I could not remember what I liked. I mean, I have like a vague idea of what I thought of them, but I couldn't really speak. So let's get into it. I also have my book journal over here, which I did do in my February wrap-up, where I kind of just like keep track. Okay, empty fucking page. I keep track of what I've read. And for example, like this, I will do little summaries of what I thought. So the first book that I read in March was Do No Harm. This is a thriller that is about a mom, and she's a surgeon, and then she gets threatened, and they say, if you do not kill this man in surgery, we're gonna kill your child. And she's like, well, what the fuck do I do? Because killing someone would make me a bad person, but then my child is dead. Like, you know, like you don't really have a good option in that moment. I had seen this everywhere, like I had seen such good reviews, and I was actually really excited for this. I did listen to this as an audiobook. I remember I started this in my most recent readathon. If you haven't watched that, go watch that now before the next one's up, and you're behind. I feel like I was expecting more of this. I remember that the ending disappointed me a little bit. I wasn't really sure what it meant. I don't like it really when thrillers do that, when they, like in the last chapter, or they do like an epilogue and then they're like, but what if? And it kind of like is trying to like extend the story, but it doesn't really help, and it just leaves me confused. Okay, what I wrote in my journal, I said, this was such a crazy story, I didn't really know what to expect. It took me a while to get through this, and I think maybe reading it would have made it more exciting to read, ? Though the audiobook was very good, I just think it wasn't my kind of thriller. Maybe it wasn't vibes, it's not my fault. And I gave this a 3.75. Then I read You Were Gone by Tim Weaver. And I read this because this is part of the David Raker series, and I had one of the books of the David Raker series on my shelf for a very long time, and I knew that this one came before that one, so I was like, okay, well, let me read this so I can get that one off my TBR. And I read and I read and I read. The other book was not part of that series, so I kept off reading that one for no reason, but we'll get to that later. This is about a woman, and she walks into a police station and she has no idea whatsoever, but she just says that she's the wife of David Raker, the detective guy, but his wife died I think 8 years ago. Yeah, a day later, after she comes into the police station, she vanishes again. So obviously everyone thinks that David Raker has something to do with it, because this random woman just claims to be his dead wife. Like, obviously he is mad at that woman, because who wouldn't be? I remember kind of towards the end, I'm waffling right now. Let me actually think what I want to say. I remember going into this book really excited because the concept sounds really good and it had a lot of potential, and I feel like it wasn't executed in the way I wanted it to be executed. And as you can tell, it's not a thin book either, but at the end, when things got revealed, I had guessed most of it, and I just was like, if I didn't guess it, I would have been more excited. I would have maybe given this a higher rating, but that just kind of like threw me off. I've been wanting to read my David Raker books for a while. I finally decided it was time. Overall, I enjoyed the book. It was quite fun, but I ended up guessing most of the ending. It felt a lot more character driven than plot driven. It was still a quite creepy story, but slightly disappointing. And then sometimes I actually can't speak. It actually makes me want to like shove my fucking fist in my mouth. To keep going on the Tim Weaver roll, I read Missing Pieces because this is the book that I thought came after this one in the series, and I didn't realize until I started reading this one. And the reason I wanted to read this so badly is because it was one of the first books on my TBR, so I have a list of my entire TBR list, and it was one of the top ones, so one of the books that have been on my TBR for the longest, so I just really wanted to get it off. Because also, like, this is about Rebecca, and she gets stranded on an island which is like closed for the winter, so everyone kind of goes off the island because it's unsafe to stay there in the winter. But she gets trapped because I think they get like the dates wrong. Her family doesn't know where she is, and now a killer is on her trail. And then there's another side, like there's another part of the story. So there's this detective who has a cold case. It kind of links to the island that the other girl's trapped at now. I remember that it felt like it was a lot of like back and forth. At some point I was just like, just get to the point now. She can be released off this island. Though I was actually creeped out quite a bit of the time. I remember that at some points I was really just sitting there and being like, no, I'm not gonna listen to this anymore because this is just creeping me out a little bit. And then when the ending came, I didn't necessarily expect it, but I don't remember what was the crazy plot twist, so I feel like that's also not very like a groundbreaking thing then. I vaguely remember, but I don't really remember why. You know, it might have also just been the fact that I was in, you know, such a focused mindset of like studying and school. But in March, you know, I did start studying and most of my classes were done. Like I did have to go to class, but we were just studying in class, and after school studying, and the weekends of studying, and there was just a lot going on. That might be why these 3 books didn't hit as much as I thought they would, just because I wasn't in the right mindset. The last book that I read in March, so if you watched either my Spend a Weekend with Me or Trying to Finish series that I'm in the middle of, part 2, you would have seen this book and you know what book I'm about to talk about. One of Us is back. This is from the One of Us is Lying series. This is the 3rd book in the trilogy. Fun fact, did you know I used to say trilogy? If you probably go to one of my older videos, you can probably see that I say trilogy, and then my mom was like, babe, that's not right. And I was like, oh. I decided to read this for finishing series because this is the 3rd book in the trilogy. Nothing's gonna come after, so it would just like be rounding off that chapter. And I had read another book by her recently. I've read actually most of her books except for one, and I had read Nothing More to Tell at the end of 2023, and I gave that 2 stars. So I wasn't really like in the mood. Like I was in the mood because I like the series. Like I had read the series like 3 years ago in 2021. Let's think, I was 14. So obviously my reading tastes are gonna vary, and I've read a lot more now, so obviously, like, I don't know, it might be like harder to impress or whatever. But I was still really disappointed because I was hoping that this would be a nice roundup of the story, but I remember so well that nothing happened. Like one thing happened, like the teeniest, tiniest bit happened, and then like nothing really happened until like the last 50 pages where I was like really, really hooked and gripped, and I was like, oh my god, like this is what I came here for. But why did it need to take 250 pages to get to that point? Like it really pissed me off. This definitely felt more like if you really enjoyed the first 2 books and you really care about the characters, you're gonna care about this more. But I was just kind of there for like the YA mystery vibe because I do really like that genre, like YA mystery. It's just really sad that this wasn't it for me and that I really had to be emotionally connected to the characters to be able to enjoy it. I would understand if, you know, you couldn't make it a 5-star without being like connected, you know, but like at least give it enough fuel so that the people that aren't necessarily super connected to the characters, that they can still have a fun time reading it and not just be bored, because that's what I was, bored. And I finished this on I think the 31st, so I wouldn't bring it into a 3rd month because I started it in February. So I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to keep this. I want to close this chapter literally. Moving on to April. Another drum roll for me, please. I read 2 full books in April. I know, it's hard. I don't really know how I could have done it without, you know, my brain. I really want to thank my brain, and yeah, thank you. No, oh my god, that was embarrassing. That's the least amount I've ever read in 1 month since I started doing booktube and kind of taking reading more seriously as a hobby. But April was the month where I had my last day of school. I started my exams. Yeah, I only literally stuck one of them in here as well, so that's gonna be fun. As you probably just saw from my book journal, I read So Not Meant to Be by Megan Quinn. This was when I decided that I really want to finish up the series that I already own. So I have a lot of series where I've read the first book or not even, and I have the whole series. And especially books where I have already read the first or second book, like I really just want to focus on finishing them, especially if they're like romance books, because you can just like fly through them a lot easier. I have had the thing where I will read the first book and then I will only read the second book like a year later, and then I kind of have to like refresh my memory what has happened in the first book, even if they're like, because these are interconnected standalones, right? Each book is like their own brother, because it's 3 brothers. Even though I like vaguely remembered what happened in the first one, I wasn't as like connected to the characters anymore. So like I don't remember what I felt when reading that one. I felt like that would have maybe made this one a bit more special, and I had seen so many good things about the third book, so I also really wanted to read this to get to the third book. So this was marketed to me as a workplace romance, and I love workplace romances. This was barely any workplace. You know, they have to work together and then they fly to San Francisco for work and stay in the same penthouse. It's not very like workplace. It's not in the workplace, and they barely really work together. I think there's like only like one moment that I remember really well where they had to do this business deal together and the guy wasn't agreeing with her, but then he like stood up for her and was like, she's one of like the most important parts of our company. If you can't agree with her, like we're cutting off this deal or something like that. I really enjoyed this for majority of the book, but eventually the girl main character started getting on my nerves a little bit, because their whole bit is that he doesn't think that girls and boys can be like friends. They like secretly hate each other because he's always been like taking the piss out of her, and then she's always taking the piss out of him. She just did it for a bit too long. I felt like all she was really thinking about when she thought about him was in like a sexual, like physical matter. I remember really well, there was this one chapter where they went to get ice cream, and it was one of my favorite chapters. It was from his point of view, and he was just talking about how she looks adorable, and like because they were sharing the ice cream and she was so happy about this fucking ice cream, and he was just like admiring her. And then we switched to her point of view, which is like 5 minutes later, and she's just like, oh, he looks so handsome and so hot in this like tank top or whatever he was wearing. And I was just like, really, can you not just enjoy the moment in a wholesome way? Of course, like they're gonna be physically attracted to each other. That's the whole point of the book. It kind of just threw me off because he was just like, it's usually the other way around, and it made it difficult for me to root for them from her perspective. I will say, for the first, I think like 60%, I was obsessed with them as a couple, and I was obsessed with this book. The banter was insane. I did definitely really like this, and I was actually like, oh my god, this could be a 5-star. But then obviously the last 40% really knocked that down, but it's still a really good book and I definitely do recommend it. I really enjoyed this at the beginning, but eventually I got the feeling from the female main character side that I was more physical. He would think of her in such a sweet way and she would kind of ruin the moment with what she was thinking. I really liked it though, definitely will read the third one. And then the last book that I read in April, Exiles by Jane Harper. I actually got this book gifted to me from my boyfriend's parents, not last Christmas, but the Christmas of 2022. So it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while, and I still hadn't read it, and I actually tried to read it and I got to page like 40, I think, and I was like, I'm not in the mood for this, I'm not gonna read this. And then I realized that there was an audiobook, so I was like, okay, let me just read the audiobook. And also just because I want to have it read, because I've had it for like a very long time now. At a busy festival site on a warm spring night, a baby lies alone in her pram, her mother having vanished into the crowds. A year on, Kim's absence casts a long shadow as her friends and loved ones gather deep in the heart of South Australian wine country to welcome a new addition to the family. Aaron Falk, federal investigator, is joining the celebrations, but as he soaks up life in a lush valley, he begins to suspect this tight-knit group may be more fractured than it seems. As hidden truths slowly emerge, Falk faces the darkest of questions. I was intrigued to see where this was going, but I felt like this wasn't really focused on what it said on the back. A lot of the story was about Kim's disappearance. So for a lot of the book, it was about Aaron and the main guy, and he was falling in love with this woman that lived there, and they couldn't be together. And I felt like for a majority of the book, it was genuinely about them and that they couldn't be together, and he was just thinking about her. And I don't know, I was more expecting like insane detective work, and it was more like as a group they all came to the conclusion. And at the end of the book, like it was just like thrown on you, like, oh, by the way, this is what happened. But I didn't really feel like we went through the motions to figure out what happened. Moving on to the actual fun territory. I should talk quicker because it's taken me very long to actually, like, that was not a rapid fire. I actually just reviewed those. Yeah, I read 7 books in May, which is actually really good for me. I know I could have read more, but I went on a trip with my mom to England, so for a week, and I don't really read a lot in England. I did finish 1 book on the plane when I went there because I flew alone, so I also didn't, like, I sat next to this random man, like there was no reason for me to be interacting with anyone, and I also like waiting to like board, so I was just like reading on my phone the entire time. And then I finished a book while I was in England, but I had like 50 pages left of that. Let's just dive into this pile. The first book that I read in May is The Appeal. I've seen this around actually for quite a while. I'd seen a lot of good things about this, and basically this whole story takes place over emails. This is what like an average page looks like. So it's all only in emails. I was like, either that could be fun or very confusing, but I listened to this as an audiobook, and I think if you read this, I definitely recommend you do. I listened to this on Nextory, and if you know me, I do have a code for Nextory if you live in the Netherlands. And I truly do really enjoy using Nextory for my audiobooks. If you use my code, you can get I think 45 or 50 days free trial. Otherwise, if you just do a normal free trial, it's 30 days, so you do get like a good advantage. Even before I started working together with Nextory, I did already use them for I think about a year. If you do decide to read this book, definitely read it as in like listen to it, because every character had a different voice, which just made it a lot more clear on who was who. And I feel like if I did just read it as a book, I think it would have taken me a lot longer to figure out who was who, what was going on with who. It did still take me a while because there's a shitload of characters. Because it is, I'll read you the back. It says, there's a mystery to solve in the small town of Lockwood. It starts with the arrival of 2 secretive newcomers and it ends in a tragic death. Roderick Tanner QC has assigned law students Charlotte and Femi to the case. Someone has already been sent to prison for murder, but he suspects that they are innocent. Throughout the amateur dramatic society's disaster staging of All My Sons and the shady charity appeal for a little girl's medical treatment, the murderer hid in plain sight. While Charlotte and Femi solve the case, will you? And you can kind of like go with them because basically the emails are evidence, because it's the emails between the cast members, and then in between you will have the text messages of the 2 detectives that are solving the case. I liked it. I just felt like at some point it was a bit dragged out, and at the ending a few things were definitely quite straightforward. I think this was her debut book, so for that it was really good. Moving on to the next book, I did end up reading A Long Time Coming by Megan Quinn. And I will say this was fucking banging. The only thing that I do regret is I did start this when I was still doing my exams, and at some point I barely read. I don't know, I felt like I was missing out with this. I couldn't like fully put all my emotion and all my attention towards this book, and that's really like made me upset because I did really enjoy these characters, but whenever I do think of them, my heart melts a little bit, like I get chills, because they are actually one of the cutest couples ever. It is friends to lovers, and I know what you're thinking. I thought the same exact thing. I was like, friends to lovers, what can you do with that? You can do so much with it, apparently. She's engaged to her husband, her soon-to-be husband, which is not her best friend, and he's helping her with the wedding planning. And I'm not even gonna say anything else, you should just read it, okay? Even if you don't read the other 2 books, it doesn't really matter. You'll just be confused on some of the side characters, but you can pick up on it if you don't want to read the other 2. I do strongly recommend it because they were both really fun. They're all billionaire brothers. This, so worth your fucking time. This was really good. This was great. Amazing even. I remember at the end, on the last page, my heart melted. Like, oh my freaking god. Everything you want in a fictional man, he was giving. I feel so many emotions towards this book that I can't even really say anything. I missed that. I'm giving it 4.75, just not a 5-star, and I genuinely am gonna blame that on my exams. If I didn't read this during my exams, I think this would have been a 5-star. I listened again. I am a fond person of listening audiobooks and reading a different book at the same time. It really helps me get through more books, you know? And then this was also Nextory. I think all the audiobooks that I did listen to for the rest of the month were on Nextory. So, just like the other girls by Claire Douglas. And at this point when I read this, I had 2 other books by her, so I definitely really wanted to get into them. The scary thing is that I actually started another book by her a couple of months ago, and I didn't really get that far. I wasn't really in the mood for it. I was confused. I didn't really know what was going on. I like half DNF that one. I just like put it to the side for a little bit, but I was like, let me see this. Like, let me see if this one is anything for me. Because it says, Una Richardson is devastated after the death of her mother. Hoping for a fresh start, she responds to an advertisement and she steps into the rich, comforting world of elderly Miss Elspeth Mackenzie. The Elspeth's home is not as safe as it seems. Catherine, her cold and bitter daughter, resents Una's presence. More disturbing is the evidence suggesting 2 girls lived here before. What happened to them? Why will the Mackenzies not talk about them? As the walls close in around her, Una fears she'll end up just like the other girls. You know, sounds very intriguing. I was like, okay, well, what does this have in store for me? I'm excited to see what this is all about. Yeah, this was good. The fuck? The fuck? Deliciously spooky. I'm having a brain fart where, like, nothing is coming to mind that I wanted to say. I remember everything that happened really well, actually, and I remember the characters really well, so that's definitely a really good bonus point, because you're probably thinking, Sophia, but if you read, you should just remember every book you read. I'm sorry, my brain doesn't work like that. There's a lot going on in my brain if you haven't been able to tell by the way I speak and the way I move. ADHD is definitely up there. I am actually diagnosed. I'm not trying to be like all quirky. I just didn't take my meds today because I thought that would... I tend to be more fun. Like, okay, let's be real serious for a second. Is it even focusing me? Whenever I take my meds and I film, I feel like I'm not as fun and I get really like robotic, especially with sitting down videos, because now I've been filming for 40 minutes and you can probably understand it gets a little bit boring and my brain gets a little bit farting and it's just not as fun, and I decided to take my meds after I filmed today and I feel like I'm a lot more quirky than I usually am. But yeah, so let me know if you prefer this or my robotic version, so I know if I should take my medication or not when I film. Okay, moving on to this book again. Not really moving on. I don't know, I really enjoyed this. I remember I was listening to it and then this like crazy turn happened, this crazy like plot twist, and I remember I was cleaning my room, so I actually had to like I like stood there for a second. I was like, wait, what? So I think I'm gonna give this a 4 or 4.25. I will have to have a little think about that. Now I was done with my exams and I was allowed to unwrap a book a day. She wrapped a bunch of books. My mom, she wrapped a bunch of books for me to open after I was done with my exams, because she got a bunch of books for me when she was in England and we decided to wrap them so I could open one a day. So it's more fun like that, so it's not all instant gratification, so to say. This was the first one that I opened and I immediately decided to read it. The Co-Worker by Frida McFadden. I'm a huge Frida McFadden fan, if you didn't know. I have most of her books, 7 or something. I have quite a bit. I think she's one of the authors that I definitely have most of the books of. This is one of her most like recent releases, and I feel like I haven't really seen as much about her recent releases as of her than her like older books, like The Housemaid, The Inmate. Like I see a lot about those, but I don't really feel like I see a lot of reviews about these more recent books. This was fun. Again, I have listened to it. I think I listened to the first half because I was redoing my bookshelves, and that video is going to be up I think later this week. You have a little sneak peek of these shelves over here. Actually, I wasn't reorganizing, I was just cleaning my room. Whatever, that video is still coming up, but I was cleaning my room, like deep cleaning my room, and I was listening to this and I was having a lot of fun with it. It's basically about this woman. She one day doesn't show up to work, but she always shows up to work like at the same exact time. She's like a very routine, and I did kind of feel like she portrayed autism a little bit, just because I found myself relating to her. I also have autism. Like, she had a lot of autistic traits, and I don't know if that was Frida McFadden's like kind of like idea with this. I haven't really seen that been like said anywhere. Maybe it was one of those books where like you don't directly say it, but you know. And if that wasn't, then she's just a quirky girl. But I can name, I think, a good 3 traits that definitely were very obvious. I remember she was saying how she doesn't really like holding eye contact with people. She was obsessed with turtles. Yeah, the routines, obviously. She was really awkward in social interaction. She didn't really know how to pick up on social cues. Like, these are all telltale signs of autism. Not me speaking like I know anything, it's just from my experience, okay? She one day doesn't show up to work, and this one co-worker, she goes to look out for her. Goes to check up on her, right? And that's where I'm gonna leave it. It's very interesting, definitely really like this. I think I'm gonna give this a 4.5 because I did have a lot of fun with this, and reading my fan and we'll catch up with the twists again. Then the next book that I read is Powerless. So I did read this on the plane to England. But I read the first half. I read majority of the first half the day before, and then I read I think like 240 pages at the airport and in the plane. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a bit disappointed with this one. So this one's also Friends to Lovers, and after I just read A Long Time Coming, I was like, okay, maybe I am in my Friends to Lovers era. Maybe I will like this more than everyone else, because the whole thing what I had with the Twisted series, that everyone didn't really love Twisted Hate, but Twisted Hate was my favorite. So I was like, maybe it's a scenario like that again where I'm just different than everyone else. No, it wasn't. I do agree with everyone. So far this has been my least favorite. I just felt like this was 480 pages, definitely way too long. She decides not to get married. Like, I'm not gonna say too much. They kind of like run away together. I don't know. Also, they admitted that they liked each other literally on the 50% mark, and I that's too early. That is way too fucking early. And I'm pretty sure they kissed as well, and I was like, no. If you're gonna make this book 480 pages, you can wait. You can wait. It just wasn't what I wanted it to be, and I was really upset about that because I did feel like it had a lot of potential. I don't know, it was just a bit dragged out. But I'm really excited to get to Reckless, so I think this is gonna be like a 3.25, 3.5 at max. I will stuff to the side. Did I fly through this? Yeah, but not because I really cared, just because I wanted to have it done. Okay, now the second last book of this wrap up, which is already taking me 50 minutes to film. I read Then She Vanishes by Claire Douglas, another Claire Douglas book. So this was the book that I actually like put to the side, half DNF'd, and after I finished Just Like the Other Girls, I decided to pick this up again because I was looking for a new audiobook to listen to, and I did really enjoy that book. So I was like, let me give this one another try, but let me focus a bit more when listening to the beginning. And I immediately off the bat knew more what was going on. I think I just wasn't really focused when listening to the beginning. And it says, Heather and Jess were best friends until the night Heather and Jess were best friends until the night Heather's sister vanished. Jess has never forgiven herself for the lie she told that night, nor has Heather. But now Heather is accused of an awful crime, and Jess is forced to return to the sleepy seaside town where they grew up to ask the question she's been avoiding for so long. What really happened that night Flora disappeared? And I did really like this, so there's a lot going on, but I feel like this was also definitely a bit more character driven now that I think back on it. But I cared about the characters, so I did have a lot of fun, and I feel like there were a lot of like side plots. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but there were a lot of like side plots. Subplots, that's the word. There were a lot of subplots, and there's like little other sprinkles of things that were going on to also kind of keep you interested, which I really, really enjoyed. I don't really have to say too much about this book, just because, I don't know, I'm getting tired of speaking it. So let's just get to the last book. The last book is another Claire Douglas, the last book that I read this month is another Claire Douglas book. I again listened to this on Nextory, and I finished this quite quickly. The Girls Who Disappeared. I know these all actually sound very similar because girls disappeared in the first book, girls disappeared in the second book, and girls disappeared in the third book. The funny thing is that when I bought this, because if you see my last book haul, I bought this at a charity shop. I just saw Claire Douglas and I barely even read the back. I was like, I like her book, so let me read another one. So it says, 20 years ago, one rainy night, Olivia Rutherford is driving through friend's home when a figure in the road causes her to swerve and crash. Regaining consciousness, she finds herself alone in the car. Her friends have vanished. Now, journalist Hannah Halliday visits the close-knit community of Staffordbury to persuade Olivia to talk and solve the mystery of the girls' disappearance. But Olivia won't speak. Is Olivia hiding something? Why are the people of Staffordbury so frightened? And how many secrets can one small town hide? I enjoyed this a lot as well. I feel like I wasn't as connected to the characters as I was in Then She Vanishes. Again, I felt like there were a lot of like side quests going on, and a lot more than just the main story. I feel like character focused, because obviously we're trying to get information out of this girl and everyone in the town, and it's quite interesting to see how everyone has like different opinions on things. Oh yeah, and the ending was definitely fun. Oh my god, okay, I remember. There is also a like dual like timeline going on, but you don't really, like, I didn't really understand the other timeline, but you will figure that out. You will figure it out. And I thought that was really fun. It kind of kept me on my toes, kept me thinking, and the ending definitely had me in shock. It was very thrilling towards the ending, had a lot of fun. Yeah. I'm slowly shutting down because I think it's overheating because it's been on for like over an hour. So I'm gonna quickly wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I think, let's see how many books I actually did read these past few months. 13 books is definitely not bad. Here's a little analytics. I forgot to say this at the start, so let's just do it now. Not bad, not bad. I don't know what the analytics are just yet, so not bad. I hope you enjoyed today's wrap up. I know it was a bit longer one. I hope it was more fun than my usual ones. I tried to be more energetic and in-depth and whatever. That was all for today. If you're still watching, please subscribe and like and, you know, all that cringy YouTuber stuff, because the thing is that it does help me out actually a lot. So I'm really embarrassed to ask, like, hey, can you like and subscribe? But yeah, no, it does make me feel a lot better. So if you're still watching, I know we're not doing the emojis anymore. I'm sorry if you missed the emojis. But if you're still watching, please comment. What is the book that you read in May that you liked the most? Please let me know. And I will see you when I see you. Bye. See you next time. My camera's actually overheating. Fuck.